Today we're going to discuss how a small papal state was almost carved out during World War I. And I have an expert here to talk about it with me, and it's Dr. Stewart Stehlin. He's an emeritus professor of history at NYU, whose field of specialization is the diplomatic history of Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries and the development of modern European state in the 19th and 20th centuries. He's the author of Weimar and the Vatican, 1919 to 1933, German-Vatican Diplomatic Relations in the Interwar Years. That's available on Amazon, and I'll have a link to it down below. He also wrote a paper entitled Germany and a Proposed Vatican State of 1915 and 1917. And I discovered that paper while I was researching our recent video here on this channel regarding urban legend about was St. Pope Pius X murdered.
It was treading water until Leo XIII came in, and Leo took a much different tact to the problem, and that is friendly, concern, more social issues, and his encyclicals were done and written in those terms. But politically and diplomatically, I should say, the feeling was that the Vatican isn't a heavyweight in the playing. And again, going back, I mean, the thinking pattern, remember during Napoleon, the Pope was taken to Paris. Napoleon wanted to keep an eye on him, so he was powerless. So we get the idea of many of them. And then when it comes to 1870, and as I say, the Pope asking Bismarck to help, the Pope talking to the French bishops, didn't have the, so the attitude was, so far, okay, he can issue his encyclicals and he can be a social, a forwarder or promoter of social issues and things, but he's not going to be a player on the diplomacy, and nobody at that time is willing to go out of their way to help him. And is when does it, the Vatican's attitude, of course, among many is watchful waiting and wait for the opportunity. And that's, of course, in anything. I mean, Bismarck did the same thing. Fortuitous things helped him for unification, Piedmont the same, and of course, the Pope is in that position as well. When 14 stops, the game changes.
When what starts?
When 1914, with the war, the game changes. You reconsider the whole situation.
I guess I came out of the warring parties looking for an edge to get an upper hand.
Sure. The realization increasingly, now remember, the Pope has issued all these statements, and of course you have media beginning more. The newspaper becomes prominent. You have an increased reading public at the end of the 19th century, and all of this, suddenly the realization by 1914 is, well, if nothing else, because of the now strengthened Vatican, for example, the insistence of ad limina visits of all the bishops have to come every 5 years to the Vatican to report. You know, this is a tightening of centralization. But you see, this is no different than what's happening in the secular world. I mean, after the Republic in France, nationalism, after 1870, one of the things that was stressed in schools was national patriotism. And there's a famous book written, Frenchmen into Patriots, you see, and Germany, the same thing, the stress. Well, now the emphasis is to do that, you have to centralize the country. The church has to centralize as well. But with this, the case, if everything is in Rome, then it would make sense to find out what they know in Rome. And this is immediately obvious to, say, for example, the English. The English had no representation at Rome in the 19th century. Catholics were bad guys. But the government realized in the war, hey, this is a good listening post. So we should, and they establish in 1914 a diplomatic post with the Vatican with the idea of keeping their ear on what's going on. So you see the Vatican stock is increasing in this period, and that's an advantage for A, the other countries, and B, for the Vatican in terms of now maybe it can be listened to a little better. So it changes in that sense, but it takes a while. I mean, Germany, for example, France, all of them have their representatives. Germany has two because given the history of the way the country had developed, Bavaria had a representative as an independent state of Germany, of course, had a representative at the Vatican. And then in the 1880s, Prussia has one too. So you've got two German representatives there. And they take care of, for the whole of all of Germany.
So prior to the war, Italy had a treaty with Austria-Hungary and Germany.
Correct. Called the Triple Alliance. Happened in the 1880s.
And was there an expectation that at the beginning of the war, or a hope at the very least, that Italy would join the Central Powers during World War?
Well, everybody, both sides were looking. I mean, Italy was neutral, and as a result was in an ideal position. Both sides would like to see them on their side. And the problem that, we'll say Germany, the leading power in the Triple Alliance, I mean, the Triple Alliance was, for various reasons why it came into being. I mean, I might try to make it short. The reason, I mean, if you looked at it, the first thought would be, why would a Latin country like Italy join with the two Teutonic powers, Austria-Hungary and Germany? They'd be outvoted. Well, at the time that this was there, Italy was having trouble with France, particularly over colonies in North Africa, because France, of course, had Algeria and Morocco, and Italy wanted, being a good national country, you got to have colonies. That's what you'd want. So there was bad relations between the two of them. So therefore, Italy decided, I will show France and I'll have some allies. And they join the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. The problem is there's always a discord between particularly Austria and Italy over the borderland, over the South Tyrol and things of this sort. So this becomes worrisome to the Germans, that what if the Italians pull out? What if they go off to the other side? So the Germans always keep saying to the Austro-Hungary, you settle it, make a few compromises to the Italians. The Allies do the same thing. And of course, Italy is in a wonderful position. Um, and just as Poincaré, one of the French politicians, says, and correctly, he says the Italians will sit by, watch, and see what happens, and jump to the winning side. And that's exactly the case. And all promises were made for this, that, and the other thing. But the one main from our position that's of interest and concern is the Italy in dealing with the Allies says one of the provisions is that if I join you, when things are settled at the end, the Vatican is not even invited to join the discussions. Because Italy obviously is afraid that if it is, and again, you can go through historical situations of the 19th century when countries are afraid when you get to a unified Congress, unpleasant issues may be raised, and then it's hard to close the Pandora's box again. So Italy just made it, you want me? You got to promise the Vatican doesn't get invited. And that was the case. And of course, the Central Powers can offer that, of course. They can say it, but the weak point is still any conflict between Austria-Hungary and Italy, which obviously gives them a weaker position than, but both Italians still were waiting to see how the war went.
So ultimately, Italy joins
the Allies.
And so does this change situation with Germany being able to get information in Rome as it had before?
Well, at the beginning, again, the Italians, remember at the beginning, this is still a neutral state, Italy, assures the Vatican, yes, there'll be free exchange, your diplomats, your representatives, your visitors have free, they can come, it's not a problem. We guarantee that. That's verbal. And the Germans even asked that to Sannino, the foreign minister. And he says, yes, sure, I guarantee it, but it's verbal. And of course, if you're a good diplomat, you're not going to trust it or not feel very confident with that. And at the beginning, it does. And because remember now, everybody, all sides are aware that the Vatican is a good listening post. The come and go of the representatives report, tell what's going on. And then there is the other serious question that comes up, and it's even there today. I mean, I was thinking of that because due to the virus, the amount of donations for the Vatican's charitable work has dropped precipitously, and they're worried. And of course, this was the same thing during the war. The donations from the Vatican was worried that its donations and coming from the Central Powers, from Austria-Hungary and from Germany, may not get there and may not flow as easily. And as a result, this is going to put them in a bad financial position. So the Germans are very worried from that viewpoint as well, that they've got to keep up their good attention to the Vatican for A, their own interests, and B, the Vatican. So there's a mutual interest of both the Vatican and Germany right at this time.
After the 2 weeks since I've interviewed you the first time around, I forgot the name of the German diplomat who was a Catholic, a good Catholic, and was.
Erzberger, Matthias Erzberger. He's obviously a leader of the Center Party. He's in the Reichstag, and he's a vocal Catholic, and he's listened to both in church circles and in political circles. And he is concerned with as a good patriot, with the position of Germany, and as a good Catholic with what's going on with the Pope. So he's an ideal person to be an intermediary. I mean, you've got the regular people, as they say, the representative of Bavaria and the representative of Prussia, but Erzberger is like on a higher level, and he's a diplomat without portfolio, if you want to call it that.
So once Italy came down on the side of the Allied powers, was it more difficult to have discussions between Germany and the Vatican?
Well, the way at the beginning in 1915, I mean, you still had the representatives coming and going, but it becomes increasingly difficult, and there was always suspicion that they're being watched, communicate. Remember, we don't have computers and things, everything is in paper, and this might be intercepted, might be lost, whatever. So with the tightening of the situation, the feeling of the Central Powers representative is that they're not in a free position to carry on their duties properly, despite what was said, and therefore they decide to leave Rome. And the Prussian, the Bavarian, and the Austro-Hungarian representatives leave, go into Lugano in Switzerland, right across the border, and set up shop there. And as well, the head of the Benedictine orders, the abbot primate, and the Jesuit general, they leave as well. So this causes, again, a problem of, okay, on one hand, you go where you're not being observed, but on the other hand, it makes communication increasingly difficult. And that's the case. And the growing concern from the Central Powers is that their influence in Rome is being weakened because they don't have enough people there talking to Vatican prelates, whereas representatives, clergy from England and France and Italy are putting pressure on Italy, first of all, in the immediate years to join. But of course, when Italy has joined to the Allies, then the question is to have the Vatican speak out supporting that cause. The influence of convincing the Pope as a moral leader to condemn what's happening. And throughout the war, this is a thing. I mean, the Germans are, what should we say, terrified as soon as they get the word that Cardinal Amet, who is a very influential French prelate, is in Rome. What's he doing there? What is he doing with them, with the terrible, bad Germans? And then later on, you find Cardinal Mercier, the Belgian prelate, speaking out very forcefully to when the Germans invaded Belgium, of the destruction, the burning of buildings and things like that. And of course, again, the German viewpoint of, well, where do we have somebody to balance that? So this becomes an issue. And it's a very serious one from the German viewpoint.
I'll be back again soon with the next part of my interview with Dr. Stehlin, but in the meantime, please pray for the church.